Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. We are facing extreme censorship alongside many other truth seekers out there. If you want to support the show, please consider joining the membership for exclusive and censorship-free content, share episodes, and help us spread the word. Most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts today, wherever you are in the world. Now, let's get into tonight's show. Today's guest is an internationally renowned chef, restaurateur, entrepreneur, author, television presenter, and documentary producer. He also has a podcast called Heal with Pete Evans, exploring nutritional and emotional well-being. His passion for food and a healthy lifestyle inspires individuals and families around the world. Welcome to the show, my friend, Pete Evans.
Hey, Maddie, how are you? G'day, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's so great to have you on the show. I was on your amazing podcast. We met, in a group. I became familiar with your work and you're just doing so much incredible stuff, man. I have a lot of respect for you and your work, just because you're directly in the line of fire, and you recently got the Facebook badge of honor and getting deleted with like 1.5 million fans on there over years of work. And this is like a boot out the door. So it's an honor to have you on the show. And why don't we just start with, you introducing yourself and a little bit about your history and all the amazing stuff that you're up to now.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's correct. A week ago, I was removed from Facebook with 1.5 million followers, and it was for sharing COVID misinformation. So, every time you open up a newspaper or news article from the mainstream, it's misinformation. It is misinformation. Even when they retract what they've said from months before, or Fauci says you don't need to wear a mask, then you do need to wear a mask, and this and that. I mean, where's the line drawn as what is misinformation? So I think we're in a really interesting time at the moment. But yeah, it's a badge of honor, I guess. I think I've joined the tribe, so to speak. But yeah, I've for anybody that doesn't know of me. And it sounds really weird when you're talking about yourself like this, but you asked me the question, so I'm going to share it. I've been a chef for 30 years. I trained as a culinary chef. I've opened many restaurants. We've won lots of awards. These 2 hands that you can see here have cooked over 1 million meals in a hot, sweaty box. And I spent 20 of those 30 years in a box working anywhere from 80 hours to 100-hour weeks. So I've pushed the realms of physical and mental exhaustion, as well as probably spiritual exhaustion. So I've got very tough skin, and any chef that's out there that's listening, or cook, or has tried their hand in a commercial kitchen will know how difficult it can be for long periods of time. And just to give you an understanding of what that means is we would work 16, 17, maybe even 18-hour days sometimes. And you wouldn't get a break, or you get 10 minutes to consume food in whatever way you possibly could, as quickly as possible, or have a ciggy out the back in the day. It was a pretty intense time for at least a decade or two. And it's a very tough industry. It seems to attract sort of all sorts, the misfits of society, so to speak. So it has given me really great training to be in this position that I'm in these days, which is like yourself, Matt, and the people that are either watching or listening, to sharing information. Because to share information in this day and age, you need to have some sort of large heart. You have to have resilience. You need to understand of your limitations or limits, if you have any, and where to draw your own boundaries of what you can actually commit to. And I've been fortunate enough, as I mentioned, to really push myself in many ways. And one of them was work. Some would say I was a workaholic, but I was just trying not to go broke at the time by owning my own restaurants. But in all seriousness, it was actually to become a master of a craft, which was cooking. And over the last 10 years, I've devoted myself or committed to the exploration of what it means to be healthy. Long-term sustainable health sort of is my motto. And what does that entail? And I also felt like I had a really great platform to be able to share what long-term sustainable health means, coming from a chef's background. And for 20 of those years, I really didn't understand the power of food as one of our tools for long-term sustainable health. And then over the last decade, I've really buckled down and tried to learn as much as possible in that realm, but also to expand outside of food as well, because food's pretty simple. Once you know the basic understandings of what you need to consume to stay healthy, that's all well and good, and it's pretty much the simplest one that we can adapt to. But emotional well-being, understanding our limiting belief patterns, understanding the patterns that we've created or adopted for ourselves, either from society or from our parents or from our upbringing or from television or media or gurus or whatever it may be, and being consciously aware of them, and then seeing where our limitations are in them, or identifying when they're not in alignment for us anymore. That can be a little bit trickier than just changing our diet. Going on certain ceremonial work or journeys, such as using plant medicine or breath work or meditation or physical practices, that could be a lot more difficult for quite a few people than just changing your diet. But for others, changing your diet could be the most difficult thing that anybody could ever suggest, including yourself, for you to do, because we may have emotional beliefs wrapped around what food means to us. Were we rewarded with junk food from our parents, and was that their only sign of affection to us when we did well on a test or did well in a sporting event? So there's a lot to unravel in that simple terminology of long-term sustainable health, because it's physical, it's emotional, and mental, and it's spiritual. And there's probably more to it than that as well, as we peel back the layers. So yeah, it's a fascinating journey, and I'm very grateful to have had the experiences I've had, to have that tough skin, to understand or to see how far I can push back against perhaps either myself or the establishment, and to know that we've always got the light inside us for whenever it gets really, really dark, either in us or around us, to know that we have what it takes to stand back up and move forward, however that may be for each of us, whether it's incrementally, whether it's, a millimeter or an inch by inch, or whether it's fucking running, and going head first, or actually just taking the time to sit in wherever we're at and not act, and just be aware and take that time to reevaluate and recognize what's going on in us and around us. So that was a word salad, but good luck for that.
Oh man, I loved it. And I think, I don't know if I've ever heard somebody phrase it like that: long-term sustainable health. It's so simple, but very well put. And I like how and talk about the emotional and spiritual well-being, which is incredibly important. And I also was just imagining working 16-hour days in a kitchen. I had a brief stint. I've done so many random jobs through my life, and one of them was a server. I could only serve like a very few set of tables, but I learned about the kitchen and the chaos that goes back there, and like what you can and can't do, like while things are happening, because they'll whoop you if you're messing up their system in the back. So it seems like a high stress environment. And I'm curious, one of the things that I've been wondering in watching what you go through, because you're high profile, so you have a lot of eyes on you. And like when this started happening, I started sharing, and I'm kind of a lower profile, but I got a lot of spears and bows and arrows and lost friends, and I'm still losing friends, and really hard. Like I think the losing close friends one is really tough, because every single time I in no way want them out of my life. And the only way, like if I'll share my point of view, and if it doesn't agree with theirs, then they eject me. You know what I mean? My door is always open, but they eject me. So I get the whole body of like sadness and emotion. I'm like, oh man, like this sucks. Now random people through, you know, the Twitter universe and all that nonsense. And even for you, like mainstream media, just throw them and you'll post something in there that's so hateful towards you. And you'll just have like these in the group we're in, where you have this like laughing thing. And I'm like, man, this guy's got like some tough skin. Like, I think I'd probably be crying and like holding a teddy bear or something, but it doesn't seem to phase you. So, I'm curious if you can speak about like why it's important for you to just share, you know, the truth of what you're discovering, and if you have advice for potentially other people who have influence. And the other challenge, if there are distinctions, would be this is going down to the family level, you know, like how can we communicate what our truth is, without ejecting family members, with respecting their opinion, but also being solid in your stance. Because, you know, if you go down these rabbit holes, like just food, and you understand Monsanto and all the crap that's in our food, you're like, holy smokes, like, you know, this is a very for-profit industry. You shouldn't be eating all that kind of stuff. We need to, you know, upgrade a lot of things. And you very quickly understand that a lot of food out there is killing you, right? All the stuff that's marketed, you know, it's easy to understand once you know that.
Most of it.
Yeah, right.
Most of it.
Exactly. And like, I just found out about and I didn't even, you know, food is not my strong point, but I guess the ones with all the pesticides on it, they're the dirty 12 or something like that. There's like some sort of acronym. And it's like, darn it. I was like, raspberries? I was like, come on. I was like, it's a fruit. I was like, how much more is going to be killing me? You know, this is ridiculous. So I'll just leave it at that and, you know, get your 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. I'll do my best to answer them. But I will warn everybody, I do go off on tangents, and I do have a beautiful cup of tea here. And it's really interesting because I'm drinking my tea, and I've noticed that every time you see Bill Gates on an interview, just before or as he's asked the question, he takes a moment and he sips from his cup, but it doesn't actually look like he drinks anything from his cup. And so I hope everybody, when you're watching me drink my tea, that I don't remind you of Bill Gates.
I know he did. So I actually was noticing that one of the clips, I was like, what is he always doing with his mug? What is in there? What he's always just sitting there drinking something for this, you know, CNN interview. Like if I'm getting interviewed on CNN, I'm probably not gonna be sitting there with my coffee. And yeah, it is odd.
um, Going back to your thing, I think the first thing we need to establish, these are just my opinions, everybody. So just understand that it's just what I'm here to share with you today. So take whatever you like, throw the rest out, because I'm working it out as I go along for myself. Okay. I'm a 47-year-old man that has been brought up in an environment that is very different from anybody else. We're all unique. We're all special. We're all just so different from each other. But at the core of us is, you know, this, I honestly believe we're beings of unconditional love. That's our default setting. Now, how do we get back to that setting? Some of us are already there, but how do we all get back to that default setting in such a strange world where there seems to be so much disconnection? And when you said, how do we navigate this with our family and with our friends, and what are we meant to do with sharing our truth? I think the first thing we need to do is not compare ourselves to anybody else. So nobody, what I was getting at before, don't compare yourselves to Pete Evans, don't compare yourselves to Matt Belair, don't compare yourselves to your brother or your sister or your parents or your best mates or somebody on television or whatever it may be, because we're all unique. Where we fall into trouble, I believe, is when we try to emulate and be like somebody else. Because the moment we try to be like somebody else, it's taking us away from who we are, which is our own unique individual wondrousness. Wondrousness? I'm going to make that word up. And I see this a lot. I see it a lot because, as I said, I have had the life experiences for me to express myself as I'm doing now. And if that means getting kicked off Facebook, so be it. That's okay. If it means getting attacked, if you want to use the word attack, I don't use the word as attack. I see it as exposure. If you want to see how mainstream media exposes themselves by attacking or ridiculing somebody like myself, And from my perception, I applaud it every time. I'm like, there you go, expose yourself once again. Oh, you're exposing yourself again? Fantastic. Keep going, keep going. And usually I write that when I share their stories. I'm like, is that all you've got? Keep going, keep going, keep going. You've got more in you. You can delve to another level. I know you've got it in you because that is the frequency and the energy of mainstream media. It's about sharing lies. It's about sensationalism. It's about falsehoods. It's about misinformation. It's about division. And if you're going to play this game, I'm happy to play it with you, but let's get dirty. Let's really show what you're made of, because I know what I'm made of, and I will give it back to you. For instance, they did one today, for instance, and I'll just bring this up very quickly. It's quite funny, and I haven't shared this, but it was in our top newspaper today. From Pete Evans and Ellen DeGeneres to Meghan Markle, these were 2020's biggest PR fails, and they've got my face there. And then it goes through and lists all the Ellen DeGeneres or whoever. But what I find interesting about that is they're calling it a biggest PR fail. Now, they've written about me most days in mainstream media that gets seen by millions of people in this country. So how is that a PR fail? If you really want to call it PR, they're talking about me every single day, pretty much at the moment in Australia all year, to millions and millions and millions of people. If they didn't want to elevate or make aware of somebody like myself that is sharing this information, they would completely ignore it. They would completely ignore it. Because what they're actually doing, and I know this over the last 10 years of me sharing information, starting with dietary advice, is the majority of people that ended up following me would say, I kept reading stuff about you in the newspapers, and it just didn't add up. It just didn't make sense. But originally I believed it, what they were writing. And then after the 5th or the 10th thing, I was like, something's wrong here. Something smells wrong. Let's actually go investigate what Pete Evans is actually sharing. And lo and behold, they're like, got it. They adopted the diet or parts of the philosophy. They got themselves healthier. They started a ripple effect in their own group, their own family, which is what we're talking about here, their own circle of friends. They were leading by example. Now, their family and friends may take a while to cotton on to it, because their family and friends might go, you're following Pete Evans's dietary approach? And just so everybody knows, I didn't create it. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of doctors to collate the information, which is what we share through a ketogenic paleo whole foods diet. But little by little, these people end up being the light in their family or for their friends. And while people are going through their own inner turmoil, their own awareness of their negative belief patterns, yet their brother who's taken charge of their long-term sustainable health is shining, is smiling, is standing up, is sharing stuff about this bullshit virus. You're going, how come they're so healthy and happy and doing what they're doing? Yet I feel scared. I feel weak. I'm afraid about how long I'm going to be alive for. I don't know how to look after myself if shit actually went down, if the power got turned off, if food shortages happen. What am I going to do? There was an article today in one of our mainstream papers, and they were trying to push fear. And I just off the top of my head, the headline I think was, Sydney man only eats 2 times a day now because of loss of income. I usually eat 1 time a day. And I don't want to compare myself to somebody that's battling loss of income, because that's not what this is about. But the fear around not being able to eat more than twice a day in a mainstream Australian newspaper, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. What is the human body capable of? How long can we go without food for? How much do we actually need? I seem to thrive off 1 to 2 meals, maybe 1.5 meals per day over the last 10 years. What would happen if everybody in this country actually adopted this diet because they don't have enough money and they only had to eat 1 to 2 meals a day? What would happen if everybody started to eat the way that we've been promoting over the last 10 years in our cookbooks and other people around the world have been promoting? And just to give everybody an understanding, over the last 5 years, I've become the #1 selling author in this country of Australia for food books or cookbooks and health and lifestyle. And subsequently, I was just dumped by my publisher a month ago because they believed I was a neo-Nazi and a racist because the media told them so. And that was after selling 1 million books for them. But let's go back to this. If everybody adopted, say, long-term sustainable health principles off the diet that we promote, do you know what would happen in this country alone? The supermarkets would change. 80%, 90% of what is stored in supermarkets is, as you mentioned earlier on, it's not food, it's killing people. So imagine if the supermarket changed. So it only looked like a Whole Foods, basically. Sorry, my wife's getting home in the car. It's okay. And then what happens from there? So the supermarkets change. The agricultural system would change. It could take 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years to adapt to people wanting to eat like this. Hey, Shakoba, just mama, come here.
Our dog on duty.
She can't go. She's a beautiful little poodle. Shako. So the agricultural systems would change. They just would. They go to holistic farming practices. They would change from a glyphosate-based protocol to holistic farming management. Just think about that one thing that would change. If that changed in this country and your country, what would happen? Now, the next layer of this is what would happen if everybody that wanted the long-term sustainable health turned off mainstream media? All channels, TV, radio, internet, wherever else it comes from, newspapers. Imagine what would happen then. If everybody just switched it off because they're committed to long-term sustainable health and they know that what's coming out of those channels is propaganda and lies, mainly. Well, those industries rely on money, they rely on viewership, they rely on ratings. They will crumble, they would disappear, and new ones would emerge, such as what you're doing right now. New news channels that report fact and truth and had interviews, they would emerge and they would become popular. The next stage of this is if everybody adopted this way of eating, we know that lifestyle choices, and when people say lifestyle choices, when doctors say, if we change our lifestyle, 80% of chronic illness would disappear. Now, the modern medical system is created around chronic illness. So could you imagine the medical system, all of a sudden, 80% of their industry disappears because of that one lifestyle change. Now, when people think lifestyle, the mainstream media have brainwashed people to thinking that you have to run a marathon or be a triathlete, which is nothing wrong with that. But 90% of lifestyle changes is based around our food choices. So what would happen to the medical industry if 80% of it just disappeared over the next 12 months because people weren't going? The next stage of this is the pharmaceutical industry. Most pharmaceuticals are for those 80% of chronic illnesses. So what would happen to the pharmaceutical industry within a year? And we are living proof. Many years ago, we created a 10-week program called the Paleo Way. And I had 100,000 Australians do that. And over the course of 5 years, the 100,000 people that did it, guess how many people said they got sicker? This is social media, the day of social media. 0.
Wow.
Not one person that adopted what we shared said they got worse. But in fact, I shared over many years, I got up to 3,000 stories and then I stopped sharing it because it was just pointless. Every miraculous story no longer became miraculous. type 2 diabetes reversed, autoimmune disease put into remission, autism, the behaviors improved, cancer, heart disease, fucking everything. I was sharing story after story after story, day after day after day. So could you imagine what happens to the pharmaceutical industry if people adopted this? Next point, could you imagine what happens to the government? Think about it. Who lobbies the government? Think about the universities. Think about what be taught at schools. This isn't taught at schools. Physical, emotional, spiritual, long-term sustainable health is not taught either in our schools or universities. So think about how that would change. Think about the next generation that was brought up in families and an environment where they're aware of where their food comes from. They're aware of what happens when they take each bite of that food. They understand their microbiome. They understand the environment in which their food comes from, whether it's local, seasonal, how it's grown, biodynamically, in relation to the moon cycles. Could you imagine if every child was taught how to use their breath, or taught how to meditate? I shouldn't say or, I should say and. Taught functional movement, taught yoga, taught these ancient and very powerful therapies. Maybe they're not even therapies, they're just ways of life. Maybe if they were taught in their schooling system to ask questions that actually mean something instead of rote learning. I see this future, and I don't think it's too far away. I see it happening around us in certain pockets, whether it's in the US, Canada, Australia, different parts of the world. There are people that live this way, and they're raising their children this way. And they're creating communities that emphasize this. So I don't think it's an impossible future for humanity. Going back to where we started about comparison. Now, there's people out there like yourself and myself and what I would call sort of the warriors out there, the truth warriors that like to plant the seeds for people, that have done the ceremonial work, that have walked quite a path throughout their existence where they know what they can take and what they can't take. You know, through certain plant medicine and toad medicine journeys, I've gone through my own death process. I've faced that, I've gone through that. So the media having an attack, as you mentioned before, is like, I find it comical. I find it beautiful. I find it wondrous. Because it's like, okay, they're living in that vibration. There's a lot more growth for that industry if they choose to. And I've said this in the industry that I've been working in, and I've been in mainstream. I had been in mainstream for the last 2 decades as well, working on there. I hosted Australia's #1 TV show, commercial TV show for 10, 11 years. And during that time, I had many conversations with the network CEOs or heads of the network. It would be like sitting down with the head of ABC, for instance, or NBC. I'd sit down with these people and say, you have an opportunity here. You can actually help people of this country with getting information out there. It's really, really simple. It's a choice. No one's saying that a TV network has to do this. And I've said it to journalists that have come to interview me. I said, I'm happy to do an interview with you if you're going to ask me about the science behind the dietary advice. But I would strongly recommend that you interview this doctor and this doctor and this doctor who I've interviewed that shared this information for me, because they've got the scientific credentials or the university credentials to explain it to you. Over those 2 decades, guess what? Or last decade, not one journalist has said, oh yeah, we'd love to interview that doctor. Instead, they go, no, we'll just interview you. TV executives. What about we create a show that shows people some of these long-term sustainable health benefits? We're not in the industry to do that. Our industry is to, one quote I had was, the TV industry is set up so that people that are dissatisfied with their lives can watch people on their screen that are much worse off than they are. So those people that are dissatisfied with their lives can feel better about their lives. That's our industry. I said, yeah, that's what you think your industry is. But could you imagine if you set the stage for something new? Could you imagine what that could be? It's happening. It just depends how quickly we can do it for the population, so to speak. So going back to the comparison between your friends and family, we're all on our individual journeys through life. So people like to say, wake up to other people. It's like, well, when did you wake up? Was it this year? Was it last year? Was it 10 years ago? How did you get to that stage? Some people, it's going to take them another 10 years. For some, they might need to get injected or their children injected, and for that child to suffer of the consequences of that parent's decision. And then they might go, fuck. Maybe that's my wake-up call. Maybe humanity is going through a situation at the moment where, well, I'll give you an example. When I mentioned that 100,000 people that had changed their diets, the majority of them that I shared stories from, they didn't change their diet until they were in pain and they'd exhausted every other opportunity or avenue that was there to them. And their last hope was taking some bread out of their diet. Like, if I've got to take the bread out and the pasta out, fuck it, I'll do it. Fuck, I really don't want to do it. I'd rather someone just come along and just cut me open, pull something out, stitch something up, give me some drugs, and let me get back to doing what I've been doing for the last 40 years. Because that's normal. But if I have to give up bread or dairy or grains, fuck, I don't know whether I could do it. Just cut me open. Fuck, just get it done with so I don't have to do anything. But the people that actually said, you know what, fuck it, I'll give this a shot, you know, and looking back at it and thinking about it, it's like, how have we become so not in control of our own actions that we give our power away to other people? So the people that ended up changing their lives were the ones that took control, but they usually hit the point of rock bottom for them. So looking at humanity at the moment with this virus and with vaccinations coming along, again, where humanity is handing over power to something they have no understanding about, crossing their fingers and hoping for the best that somebody else will look after them. And perhaps this will be the point where they hit rock bottom. Maybe it'll take the second shot. Maybe it'll be when a virus is reintroduced after that second shot. And then another lie is spat out through mainstream media. And another one and another one. And then people like yourself and myself will still be standing here smiling and getting on with life and not having anything injected into us. Maybe we'll be called crazy. Maybe we'll be called the ones that aren't taking one for the team. I did want to share something with you on this thought because it just popped into my head, and I saw it today from a friend of mine, Brian from Food Lies. and he did a post. He said, "When are we going to protect the vulnerable from the modern diet and lifestyle?" And he went on to write, "It's becoming a cruel and sad joke that no US public health officials have mentioned diet and lifestyle changes over the entire year of 2020. Same here in Australia. Most people in the country will be exposed to the virus at some point, and the science points to the best chance you have is if you're metabolically healthy, long-term sustainable health. The elderly are more at risk because they have more comorbidities and are less metabolically healthy. So where's all the campaigns to help people do something they have the greatest control over? Change their diet and lifestyle. They could have, I better not read that bit, it'll piss some people off. But there's the photo. I mean, it's so simple. And ever since the start of this virus, I've been calling it out. Why is no one health expert from the government talking about the immune system? Why are they not talking about pesticides in the food and how that lowers your immune system? Why are they not talking about eating locally, eating seasonally, eating organic? Why are they not talking about an anti-inflammatory diet or foods that contain vitamin C, selenium, zinc, vitamin A, vitamin K2? Why are they not talking about getting exposure to the sunlight, vitamin D? Why are they not talking about good amounts of protein and good sources of fat? When you start to ask these questions and there's no answers, well, there are answers, then things start to make a lot of sense. I asked the same thing yesterday on a post. I think in Australia, for instance, they tested over 500,000 people last week in Sydney because Sydney's going through a virus pandemic or outbreak because 2 people had it. And the Premier yesterday said she's banning kissing on New Year's Eve and people will be arrested if they're seen kissing. Like the asylum is run by the inmates at the moment. And I asked the question, I said, how much does a test cost for the government to purchase? Who was paying for it? Who was getting rich from it? Same thing with the vaccine. They're going to roll it out for free. So is the pharmaceutical companies, the vaccine manufacturers, producing for free for their goodwill and just giving it out to the governments of the world? No, because the governments have purchased or invested. And I find the word invest very interesting. Our government has invested in COVID vaccines. So they've already ordered, I think, a couple of million doses or 10 million doses for Australia. So who pays for that? Where does that money go to? And is this ongoing? Is it 2 shots a year? What happens next year when the new strain comes out, 2021, COVID-21? And if we're not asking these questions, and I said it in my post yesterday, I said, why is not one journalist asking this question? Follow the money. I went off on a tangent, didn't I?
It was a great tangent, man. I'd sit there all day. Well, you know, you brought up so many great points, and I liked how you kind of kept unraveling how powerful it would be if we changed food alone, and that's definitely your expertise, although you have a very diverse knowledge skill set, which is a weird way of saying it. But I like when you're talking about you in the media, I was just reminded about P.T. Barnum, you know, that marketer. He used to write, he would basically talk shit about himself and send it in to the papers. And so he's like, any exposure was good exposure. So he's meant to be like one of the greatest marketers of all time. He'd go to towns, if no one's talking about him, he'd just write a slander piece on himself and send it in. So it's a powerful way to think about it. And you're 100% correct in all of that. And especially with the function of news and media and what it's actually for. That's, you know, I think for some of the people I speak to are a little bit more open-minded and they're aware. I'm like, and they're like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I was like, well, you need to understand that the function of the news is not to tell you the truth. It is to tell you what they're doing and to use it as a tool for propaganda and brainwash. It is not there to tell you the truth. Like that's its function. You need to understand that. And so I think a lot of what you're doing is really amazing because you're adapting and evolving to what's going on. You're facing it, and I think that when I am looking at all the craziness going on, there's not so many people who are addressing it and then adapting it. You know, I'm like, okay, how are we going to find solutions, right? If you look at food, you know, you've learned all the negative things about food, and you're like, okay, well, now what's the solution? Let's promote the solution. And it's really amazing what those people went through, those transformations in health, right? It basically almost every illness, not all of them, but I would say 90% of illness could probably be solved by food. There's one guy, forget his name, let food be thy medicine. You know what I'm talking about? You must know.
I'm not 100%, but I do want to make this clear for everybody because when we created the film The Magic Pill and The Magic Plant, which was on cannabis, so the first one, The Magic Pill, was about food. It's a documentary, and second one was on cannabis called The Magic Plant. But both of those, I wanted to make it really, really clear that you can eat all the organic food in the world and follow our principles, and you can still suffer disease. If you're going to a job that you dislike every single day, that could be hurting people or just not fulfilling for your purpose, you know, you can suffer disease. You might have anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. It could manifest. If you have an unresolved relationship for a family member or a loved one, or guilt or shame or whatever, anger, whatever, it can still turn into disease in our bodies. That's the definition of disease. It's not being in balance or homeostasis. You know, and I know a lot of people, when I started on the cannabis journey, for instance, everybody saying it's the magic plant. I'm like, possibly. It's a pretty magical plant. But if you're still going to eat shit and you've got cancer and you think that just by taking CBD or THC or whatever terpenes or whatever is in there, cannabinoids, you're sort of missing the point. You know, cancer is a way of alerting your body that you're out of alignment, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and possibly environmentally. Which combination of those do you need to bring back into alignment? Or which one do you need to bring back into alignment? So again, food is very important. Plant medicines can be vital tools as well for physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. But just to focus on one without looking at the other elements, you know, for me, I've been a surfer for 30, 40 years now, but I just got back from a yoga class with my wife today because I know there's a part of me that needs to have more flexibility. I was in the class today with 20 other people, and, you know, not to compare myself, but I will. I was the least flexible in there. You know, I was the guy that fucking can't touch his toes, and everybody else is touching the toes. Like, okay, this is a humbling experience for me, but this is exactly why I'm here. I have to be okay with being the worst at something, but I've got so much growth, you know, and I'm in that stretch today, and the teacher was holding it for, I felt like, for eternity. And I was grateful for it at the time. I really don't like this, but I get why he's doing this because I'm not enjoying it. You know? But in that moment when I was like, I have so much more growth in this, I was like, I got excited. I was like, yeah, so much more growth, so much more growth. I'm not done yet. I'm not done. Fuck, yeah, let's go. And I finished the class and I thanked him and came home, and I'm like, that was a good way to start the day today. So, and I know that I'm going to unravel things about why I'm not flexible so far in that is going to give me greater awareness about who I am. I will probably release some disease in my body through this practice or other practices, movement practices, because I've shunned away from it for so long. All right. So there's a whole world awaiting for me inside of myself and around myself through these practices. So Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make it clear that food is important, movement is important, breath is important, sleep is important, and all of these other things. So we know, we intuitively know where we're out of balance or misalignment. We know. We don't need anybody to tell us, although there will be signs all the time telling us where our imbalances are. And I like to use the term our imperfections are perfect because they allow us to explore deeper into ourselves, and that's the ongoing pursuit here that we're all moving towards, is knowing more about ourselves each and every day. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think that's what's going to unfold over the coming years. Is media will either implode, or they will be charged for lying and corruption, because we know who's pulling the strings. And the agricultural systems will have to change because they can't sustain themselves. The medical system will have to change. I mean, I do believe that they've pushed this out too quickly, what's going on at the moment. And I think this will be their downfall. And how it'll be their downfall will be seen. Will it cause humanity to get to that rock bottom place where everybody is sick or dying or have autoimmune disease or become infertile or sterile, where it'll be virtually impossible to for humanity to move forward? And then there'll be a shift. Just like everything, things will come back, things will be in balance or come back into balance. So I'm an eternal optimist, even though it can seem a little bit a little grey outside sometimes. But I'm quite excited about what's happening, and everybody has the choice to live their lives as they choose to, and that's what I get excited about. Is, as I said before, if you wanted to eat this way that we're talking about, it's actually cheaper. Studies have been done. It's cheaper to eat the way that we're talking about: organic, pasteurized meats, wild caught seafood. You just may need to change your mindset to appreciate offal, to love liver, to appreciate sardines that are strong tasting fish that are sustainable. You know, we've sort of been brainwashed and conditioned in Western society to despise the most nutrient dense foods on the planet for us. And I don't think it's by accident. And I think a lot of it has come through programming. And if you look through tribal cultures all around the world, they were eating the best parts of the animal or the harvest, generally the animal, which was the fat and the organs, or the oysters, or the shellfish. And when you go into a supermarket these days, it's pretty difficult to find the most nutrient dense foods on the planet for human beings, in my opinion, and many others' opinion. You have to sort of go searching for it. But we were fortunate enough last week, we've raised 8 cattle with our neighbours that live next to us, and we witnessed our first cattle being killed. And it was a beautiful experience. Last year, my wife and I raised 2 pigs, and she really raised them, and she was there for the for the for the dispatching of those pigs. I was away working, so I was a little bit upset that I couldn't be there for that experience. But last week, I was fortunate enough to witness the first cow being killed. And I just before we hopped on this, I had a meal from it. I cooked up some beautiful mincemeat or ground beef, as you would call it, and popped an organic egg in the middle, fried it like a toad in the hole, but it was just meat and egg, and topped it with mustard mayo, some gherkins, and some nasturtium from the garden, and it was delicious. But I'll go back to the killing of the cow last week. So my neighbour has 3 young sons, and they're all about under the age of 5 or 6, 3 boys, and his wife was there. And I went over. It was sunrise. The mobile butcher came over in his. He's got a cool room on the back of his truck, and the 8 cows were eating some hay. And my neighbour and the butcher had picked out the one that they were going to kill, which was a 2-year-old male. And beautiful. It was the most beautiful of all the cows too. It had to be, of course, for me to witness it. Beautiful, just a beautiful looking animal. And the butcher pulled out his rifle, and took him about a minute to line up because all the cows were together. And every time he was about to do the shot, a cow put its head in the way of it, and because they were eating. And one shot was done between the eyes, and the cow went down, and another shot straight away within 5 seconds into the brain. And then throat was sliced, and blood came out. And all that happened was the other 7 cows sort of jumped when they heard the shot and moved away about 5 or 10 meters because of the startle of the noise. But after about 10 minutes, all the cows came back and started eating the hay again around the dead cow that was bleeding out. And I had a tear in my eye. I was crying. And my neighbor told me that the night before he sat with the cow, spent half an hour with the cow and basically communed with it, saying, thank you for what you're about to go through. You're about to sustain 2 families with meat for potentially 6 months to a year. And it's been an honor to raise you and to get to know you. And he went on and on and on. And then we watched the butcher skin it, take out its innards, and then hang it up and butcher it. And I have to say, it was one of the most beautiful experiences to witness, because there was no fear in any of the cows. And I posted it the next day. I posted this beautiful photo of this cow hanging up 2 halves of it. And so many people, there were a few people that mentioned how horrible that was to do that to an animal. That the animals would have been panicking, and they would have been in fear, and they would have known what was about to happen. And I can tell you, my hand on my heart, 100%, there was no fear in any of those animals. There was peace and serenity. There was one shot, and the animal was dead within a second. And compare that to a traditional feedlot system or abattoir, and nothing went to waste. The hide, the mum of the wife, she took the hide and she salted it because she's going to turn it into a floor rug, and all the offal we've got, and this will sustain us for the next 6 months. And think about that. There was one life, one large animal, one life, that the only input it had was the grass on our property. So all it took was water and grass. And now that will be our main food. I mean, the 2 pigs we raised last year, we haven't stopped eating pig nearly for the last 8 months since we've got a lot more still to go. So we're not purchasing meat or anything from the supermarkets, and we grow our own food. So that is, and we won't even get into the environmental aspects of how important it is to raise livestock on property, because it is vitally important. You can watch our documentary, The Magic Pill, to understand that, or The Need to Grow, and look at the work by Alan Savory or Joel Salatin to delve deeper into this. But it was one of the most, as I said, beautiful experiences. And my dog that's sitting right next to me here, and she had her ground meat from that cow this morning. And it's a beautiful experience to know where your food comes from, and to have played a part in that, and to actually witness the circle of life in that experience. So I don't know why I got onto that topic, but I felt like it was something worth sharing just then.
Wow. Well, the entire idea around the ethics of animals is very deep and fascinating in itself. And I was vegetarian for a few years because of the just the ethics, because I learned about factory farming and how awful that was, and I don't want to harm an animal. Um, and it was interesting because I kind of went back to meat after, I think it was like 2.5 years after kind of hanging out with the Native American elders, a Zuni elder and a Mi'kmaq elder, and just the way that they understood it and think about it is more similar to how you're describing it. Like, know where your food come from, honor your food, don't waste anything, and we're so far removed from what we're eating and understanding. You know what I mean? You go and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get a steak, and you can, it's nice and wrapped. You're gonna go get food and it's in this can, and we have no idea where it comes from, or what it's going through, and not even to get into the crap that they're putting in cows and the crap they're putting in all the stuff that we're eating when we might think it's healthy and it might not be. So I just love the idea of knowing where your food comes from, knowing what you need to be healthy, and being respectful for everything that you take. I think that we're in this society that just is in overindulgence, and I am always reminded. Have you seen Wall-E before with your kids?
I have seen Wally. It's a
Yeah,
great
how
film.
so everybody's in the chair and they've got their large coat and they get rolled off into the bed. All of this comfort and this disassociation from the process of how things are done and made. Especially in food, and that would be such a fundamental thing to control, or take our power back and understanding with, and as well as the mainstream media. If we can shift those two huge systems, we can transform as a planet. And the only other thing I wanted to kind of touch on, which I think was important, is the necessity to experience pain to change. And it's interesting when I was talking about the food, the important thing, and you said, well, it's holistic as well, which is true. I've had many guests on my show who have healed themselves of cancer and other terminal illnesses. And I've spoken to a lot of people who have also done that. And everybody said the same thing: clean food, clean water, and de-stress. Essentially, those were the ingredients. And it's mental, emotional, spiritual health and well-being. So there's no way that they could do two of the three. They had to figure out these things in their life, mostly mental and emotional and spiritual. Then the other things kind of fell into place. You know what I mean? And so it is this holistic system, and we are, holistic beings. And if you think of yourself as, like, I don't know, a house or something, you might have the heat working, but maybe your I don't know, water's all messed up. We know kind of what it is, and so if we can even get to the place where we're not hurting, right? That's just sending a signal something's wrong. So if you're overweight and you go get liposuction, that's not really a solution, right? And that's kind of what we're doing a lot of the time, is the liposuction version, rather than getting honest with ourselves and making the changes that we need. So I agree with everything that you're sharing. But you wanted to jump in there, so go ahead.
Yeah, I read something today. I think it was from the World Health Organization, Ted Ross fella. I,
Oh, that humanitarian Tedros.
yeah, apparently, I read something today from him saying that the next thing that they're going to be tackling, his words was animals. And from my understanding, what he means by animals is stopping us eating them,
Hmm.
because apparently they're destroying the climate, which is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard, and climate change to go into that as well. So I think the COVID thing is a precursor to the next part of this insanity, which is going to be food. And it's going to happen. I believe it'll happen rapidly, what they're going to push in relation to food, whether it be food shortages or condemning people for eating or growing healthy food, um, all under the guise of climate yet. So I think this would be an important topic for people to read up on, to understand. And again, I would refer people to the work of Alan Savory from the Savory Institute, as well as Joel Salatin. I mean, there's just two really good, valuable resources, so that you can be informed and educated upon what is about to unfold, so that you can be, again, lead by example for your family and friends to be able to share the right information, or differing information than what is going to be fed through the mainstream agenda, because we know the players that are heavily invested in fake meats, they're the same people that are heavily invested in the vaccines, that are heavily invested in the mainstream media narrative to brainwash people. So get informed, think about it critically, use common sense, think about how this earth has existed for, for billions of years and millions of years and hundreds of thousands of years with grazing herds of wild animals, and how best we can mimic that again in our modern day age. And the thought that cows farting is affecting the climate is probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, apart from injecting ourselves for a virus that they can't isolate with a vaccine that isn't safe, that doesn't prevent the virus anyway.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because if you do some research, and although it might be challenging at first to find good information, a lot of people say to me, well, like, how do you know what the truth is? And I say it's like it's a discovery of truth. Like, it takes a bit of time, but after you kind of go through that initial research and confusion, then it becomes very clear what is the truth, because all these other people from different fields are coming to the exact same conclusions. There's a guy recently that I came across named Martin Armstrong. He's an economist, and apparently he's one of the world's super brilliant economist. A client of mine who's very, very successful turned me on to his stuff, and she goes, I just paid for his seminar. And basically the first words out of his mouth were, we're at a war with Satanists or something like that. He's like, holy crap. And like, this guy never go down that rabbit hole. But it doesn't matter what your field of expertise is. If you look at the world and you say, why is this happening? You start to peel back the layers, and then, oh, okay, this makes sense. And so that's the same thing with climate change, where if you question it, it's ridiculed right away. But maybe climate change could be happening, and you could use it for nefarious ends. Like, should we be more responsible with farming and the way that we navigate the world and what we do as a society? 100%. And maybe even the climate change thing is totally legit, and we're skyrocketing and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean you add all these nefarious things too, right? You don't piggyback on that and include that. You have to be able to separate those two. You don't stick it like glue. One means the other. And so it's just important to understand, because if we know what is dangerous, like that, for instance, like the vaccines, just like if you look into it, use your own critical thinking. If you think it's super safe, right, and you love it, then go for it. But if you really look into it, to me, it seems pretty dangerous. Robert Kennedy Jr. has done a lot of work on this, and I didn't even look into anything along these lines until the coronavirus happened, because I was very curious about it. So if we can understand, and just like food, right? Like, I just learned about the pesticides all over raspberries. Like, damn it. Then I can go get, I was like, not even now, a raspberry's getting me? Like, holy crap, what else is dangerous in this friggin' environment? I'm feeding them to my 14-month-old daughter. I was like, now I got to make a different choice now, right? So then I can make a different choice with that knowledge and understanding. So I think that's why this is very important, because these are society. This is engineering society on a mass level. And for us to stay informed, to make good choices for our friends and our family, is going to be what provides an alternative and a solution. Because I think all the people who, once they figure out the negative aspects of whatever it may be, food, modern medicine, whatever the case is, they're going to like, okay, what's the solution? And if you go through the mental, emotional, and spiritual transformation, you need a lot less. You know what I mean? You're not out about getting stuff. You're more about cooperating. What do you need to thrive, and what's most important to you? And those types of people are going to be looking for the same solutions, and we can work together like you. And it's like, two families, right? They're coming eye to eye and having the same values. Like, okay, this is something that we believe in. And as other people see the results, and they see the health, and they see the smiles, and they see the vitality, it's something that they can then embrace as well. And so that's what gives me hope in this, because when I look at the large scale engineering of the planet, it's super concerning. I was like, holy crap. And maybe it's what's necessary for a transformation, because the way that the world was a year ago and 3 years ago and 10 years ago was not good, right? We had blinders on and we didn't want to look at anything. And now it's got worse and worse and worse. So now it's like, you almost can't look away, but people are still trying to look away. It's crazy to me. So just like, this is, it's just madness. So hopefully this opportunity for us to have an upgrade as a civilization. I think if we had to explain to an intelligent, benevolent race of ETs why this is happening, it would be like a disgrace. You know what I mean? You'd just be apologizing for, like, I don't know, that uncle or something that's like super inappropriate or whatever. You know what I mean? He's like part of your family. You got to introduce. It's like the whole human race is like, well, why do you do this evil thing? Why are like 9 million of your citizens dying each year? Why don't you figure out how to give them food? It's like, well, there's some evil people over here and I'm trying, but we don't want to cooperate and we're really busy with work. And I don't know, like, will you help us? Like, we need help. And so we need to grow up as a civilization. And I think that that's what we're in right now. We're in this opportunity to grow up as individuals, and then also as a civilization. And so that's just my 2 cents. And I'm curious what you think of that rant.
Yeah, I agree. We do have the solutions. I offered one before, as in, that's if we all did it, and that's what those ETs would say.